Yeah.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Prep. I am Jerry here with Cody, hosted by Going for Two. Cody, what's going on? Big week 2 that we just had going into week 3 now. How's it going today?
Pretty good. I'm excited for the start of the football season, or week 2 of NFL this weekend and week 3 of college.
Yeah,
Just
got a
happy
lot
football's back.
of big games on the schedule this week. Really no games that feature 2 ranked opponents against each other, though. So it's a lot of bigger spread games, and before they get into the meat of things. Yeah, let's get into how our week 2 guys went. We're going into week 3 in the NCAA season. Let's get into how our week 2 guys went. I'll start out with my quarterbacks. I had Quinn Ewers of Texas and KJ Jefferson of Arkansas. Both got wins for their teams. Texas up against Alabama. Ewers went 24 of 38 for 3 touchdowns and no picks. KJ Jefferson going up against Kent State. Went 13 of 19, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and then 13 rushes for 48 yards on the ground. How'd your quarterbacks do this past week?
DJ Ugalele had another good game. He was 8 for 13, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 4 carries, 11 yards, and a touchdown. Casey Thompson didn't have as good as a week as he did before, with 23 for 42 for 180 and 2 interceptions. I can't remember who they played. I didn't write that down, and I threw away my – wait, maybe not. I do remember who they played. DJ Ugalele played UC Davis, and Casey Thompson played Ohio. So, which is kind of interesting that Ohio was the one to beat him and make him play pretty bad, because we've talked about some Ohio Bobcats already on offense, so their defense is not too bad either.
Yeah, and Ohio has another pretty decent game coming up this week too. Might touch on a couple of their players. Running backs, I had Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, and then Kendall Milton out of Georgia. Henderson, good game, 5 for 56, but 2 touchdowns on the ground, 2 for 18 receiving. Milton found the end zone, didn't have a lot of yardage, 9 total touches, but he went 7 for 18 on the ground with the touchdown, and then 2 catches for 9 yards in the win versus Ball State.
I had Bucky Irving from Oregon. They played Texas Tech, and he had another really good game with 11 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown, and then he had 7 receptions for 50 yards. Then I had Rasheen Ali from Marshall. They played East Carolina, and he dominated as well with 18 carries, 85 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then 4 receptions for 45 yards. So he was all over the field.
Yeah, great game from him. For wide receivers, I had both the Texas boys, Mitchell and Worthy. Mitchell went 3 for 78 and 2 touchdowns. Worthy 5 for 75 and 1 touchdown. Again, like I said, they beat Alabama, number 3 Alabama, in a really good game. Seems like it was dominated a lot by Texas. Alabama kind of climbed back in, but ultimately they lost by 12. But pretty good games out of the 2 Texas wide receivers. And as we mentioned in a couple episodes, that Quinn Ewers and Texas are pretty much going to go hand in hand together. And we're going to be seeing a lot of these kind of games from those guys.
Yeah, and my first wide receiver was Evan Stewart. I know he was a sophomore, but he absolutely dominated with Texas A&M. 11 receptions for 142 yards. That was one of the games of the week, I thought. It was a shootout, and it was really fun to watch. They beat Miami, or Miami beat them, and it was just a really, really fun game. And then my other wide receiver was Jamari Thrash for Louisville. They played Murray State on Thursday when we recorded last week, and it was 3 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown, and then 1 carry for 12 yards and 1 touchdown. So he's seeming to be a Swiss Army knife, and I'm pretty excited to see where he goes from here.
And then the final player I had, I only went with 1 tight end this week, but it was Eric All out of Iowa. Didn't do much in the air, just 3 for 32. Iowa did win that game over Iowa State. Again, it's going to be up and down year for tight ends. There's some athletic ones out there, some fantasy relevant. All tight ends for their teams are going to be good, but as far as like the fantasy relevant guys, it's going to be few and far between. They usually take a couple years to develop in the NFL, anyways. So we'll see how Eric All transitions into the NFL.
Yes, talking about ups and down, the one tight end I had was Mason Taylor. He had one reception for 0 yards, so that was fantastic. And then the other one was Benjamin Urasic for Stanford. They played USC. He had four receptions for 54 yards, so I thought that was a pretty good game out of him. And I was excited. I'm really excited to see what else he does throughout the year.
All right, and then just a quick recap of some other guys that at their respective passing leaders, the top five: Michael Penix, 409 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Daniels, he went 401 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Sanders from Colorado, 393 and 2. Jacob Zeno of UAB, he went 385, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And Anthony Calandrea went for 377, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Any of those guys stick out, or any of the other guys 6 to 10 maybe stick out to you?
Michael Penix just doing what he does. He keeps rising his stock, it seems like to me. Which is really nice. With that, we can go on to what we were talking about earlier, and that's some of the games that we wanted to bring up for the 12 o'clock slate in week 2. Is that right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So we wanted to go on to some of the 12 o'clock slate for some of the big name games, right, for week 3.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to do something a little different this week. Instead of picking 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, we're basically just going to go through a lot of the games that are on basically the major networks. So we don't have any ESPN Plus games on here. Don't have any Big Ten Network games on here because those aren't available to a majority of the people unless you pay for those subscriptions or whatever. So what we're actually going to do is kind of go through the time slates. I got them written down in Eastern time. I know we're in different time zones, but so when I mentioned it was going to be Eastern time zone. All the Fox games, ESPNU games, ESPN games. I believe I put FS1 on there too, and then ABC, CBS, all those other channels. Basically break down every single player. We're just going to kind of give you the list of guys that you should be looking out for in those specific games, going game by game and slate by slate. And then, yeah, so that way if you're tuned into a game, you're just sitting on your couch Saturday and you turn on Fox and you see that this is a bad example because there's really not much draft eligibility players to look out for, but Penn State and Illinois play it on Fox on Saturday at noon Eastern. But the guys that I have mentioned, they're all sophomores, so they're not coming out in the draft next year. But it'd be good to look at the guys, the running backs, Katrin Allen and Nick Singleton from Penn State, and the quarterback Luke Altmaier out of Illinois, and see those are going to be guys that you're going to be hearing a lot of next year going into the 2025 draft. So that's kind of an example of what we're going to do. So let's start it off. Outside of that game, LSU and Mississippi State is our first game. That's going to also be on at noon on Saturday Eastern time on ESPN. 14-ranked LSU up against Mississippi State. The guys I got to look out for are going to be a lot. It's going to be LSU heavy. Jaden Daniels, quarterback. John Emery, running back. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And I'm sure if you watched that first game against FSU, you heard Brian Thomas quite a few times in that game, both wide receivers. And then Mississippi, I got Jaquavius Marks, the running back. Any players that I may have missed, or I know LSU is your team, so if you want to touch on them a little bit more.
They are my team, and the surprise, but it shouldn't have been a surprise because he was a transfer that came in, was Logan Diggs. He came from Notre Dame, and he put up 1,000 yards last year for running back. So we still don't know what the running back rotation is at LSU. But Logan Diggs got a lot of play last game, so it'll be interesting to see if they go with Emery and Kane, or do they go with Williams and Diggs. They all kind of complement each other, so that might just be a running back by committee, but they have 4 backs that can produce. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of rotation they have this week.
Yeah, that should be while you're talking about the next game, I'm going to try to get the spreads up in here. I know we're not really a betting podcast, but at least kind of give you an idea of if it should be a closer game or not based on what Vegas thinks. So we'll skip that game because I
Yep.
don't want to have a lot of dead time. But we'll go to the next game. It's going to be on FS1, North Dakota at Boise State. Not a huge list of players out there. I mean, obviously, keep an eye on all these guys because there are going to be some freshmen and sophomores. And when I was going through a lot of the players, there was a lot of freshmen and sophomores that came up. And we're actually going to have not a special show because it's going to be on our regular time as well. But we're going to have it in the next coming weeks that more focuses on freshmen and sophomores and guys that they're not necessarily coming out in 2024, but in a couple years from now or the following year. Because there's a lot of like younger guys that are getting a lot of work in these offenses, and we kind of want to touch on them too, get a little early head start. So these are all juniors and
Yeah.
seniors that we're talking about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I mean, even with that North Dakota Boise State game, you wouldn't think a lot of people would be coming out of those two colleges. But I mean, North Dakota had two guys. They weren't drafted, but they were undrafted free agents that made a splash. Tyler Hoosman was a running back for LA. He's on their practice squad, and Garrett Mag is on the Vikings practice squad. Like, there's still some talent even in these smaller schools that we're going to try to find for you. And like what you're saying, Bo Belquest for wide receiver for UND this year, he's pretty dynamic.
Yeah, Bo Belquest, wide receiver for North Dakota, and then Boise State has a running back over there, George Holani. Definitely keep a look at him. Those guys, or did I miss anybody from that game?
Right now, that's all I've seen from there. But the another game that we didn't skip over, but another game I'm going to be watching again is Iowa State at Ohio, and my boy Sam Wiglitz is going to dominate, so I'm pretty excited to watch him again. Other than that, there's again a lot of sophomores and juniors, or a lot of freshmen and sophomores I'm excited to watch, but not really on the older class. But it is really interesting to see. I think Ohio has a shot to beat Iowa State, and now we all know what happened with Iowa State and their scandal with gambling and stuff, so they don't have a lot of their best players. But Ohio's got a team this year that is pretty dynamic, and they're always a must watch in my opinion. And the 12 o'clock slate at ESPNU, that's a good one to watch.
Yeah, no names really stick out in that game, but obviously there's going to be players on the field playing football, so just keep an eye on them, and they got a lot of younger players. Next game, again, not a lot of big names here. Wake Forest at Old Dominion. Wake Forest is favored by double digits, -14 according to DraftKings. That game's on ESPN2 at noon. And Old Dominion has Grant Wilson, if anything, could be a late round quarterback in the draft or an undrafted free agent that latches on with a practice squad. He's got some size, though. That's the reason I brought him up. I believe he was a senior. I could go back and double check that, but not much really going on in that game. ESPN2, if you want to check him out, he's the quarterback for Old Dominion. Next game up is Florida State at Boston College. That's going to be on ABC, so your local channels don't even need a box or anything to watch that one. Just hook up your antenna. Number 3, Florida State. It's pretty Florida State heavy, like we talked about with LSU. They got the quarterback, Jordan Travis. They got Trey Benson, the running back, who had a pretty good game last week. And then Coleman. I mean, they're just fun to watch all over the place. This game is on at noon, so I know that the last couple of games they've played, they were later, able to get out of work on Saturday and go home and sit down and grab a beverage and watch them. Unfortunately, I'll be at work for this game, so I can't really sit down and watch it, but I will have it on my phone streaming it. I think it's going to be offense heavy for Florida State. Boston College isn't really a great team. Let's see if I can find the odds real quick. Yeah, they're favored by 26 points according to DraftKings. So should be offense heavy for Florida State and get to see those guys. Do you have anybody for BC, or you want to touch on the Florida State guys?
I mean, what I know about Boston College is their linebackers aren't the best. So even Jaheim Bell might have a better game in this regard in regards to stats. I mean, they have a lot of weapons already, so he's not going to be very stat driven. But this one might be one of the games that he is. So he's always a fun watch too. With what he's just a true tight end, and I like watching him. So
Yeah, just a joker position. Basically, he's definitely fun. That whole offense is fun, but I mean,
Yep.
one football's got to go to 4 or 5 different places, so it's always interesting to see how it's spread out. Um, a little later slate, 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern slate. A couple games starting at staggering times. You got Minnesota at number 20, North Carolina on ESPN. Little North Carolina heavy, especially with Drake May being the quarterback. They're gonna potentially the number 2, number 3 quarterback in this draft class. Could go in the top 5, top 7, depending on how the order goes. But you got Drake May. UNC also has Devontae Walker, wide receiver, and Bryson Nesbitt, the tight end. And that game is North Carolina's favored by 7.5.
Yeah, and then I got my boy Brevin Spanford on the Minnesota side. If his quarterback play can ever do anything, he's always fun to watch at 6'7", 270, and he's playing in the slot. That's always a mismatch, so it's always fun to watch. And then you'll see how bad his quarterback is because he can't even get him the ball. So,
But it's just another tight end to add to the shallow list of tight ends. So at least we got
yep,
that position there.
yep.
Also at 3:30, you got San Diego State University going up against number 16 Oregon State. That's going to be on FS1. You got your quarterback that you talked about last week, DJ Ugalele for Oregon State, and then you also got Silas Bolden, the wide receiver from Oregon State. That's all I could really find for those guys. Did you have anybody while I find these odds?
No, SDSU is going through that rebuild too because they just had that scandal with their football team as well. So it's really hard to see. A lot of their talent got transferred out, and they're in a full rebuild there as well. So I expect Oregon State to win heavily.
And they're favored heavily, 24.5 for Oregon State
Yeah.
at home. Then you have South Carolina going up against Georgia, number 1 ranked Georgia. That's going to be on CBS, another antenna channel that you could get. Got a few names from both sides here. For South Carolina, you got Spencer Rattler, quarterback, and Xavier Leggett, wide receiver. For Georgia, you got a lot of skill positions here. Kendall Milton, who I talked about last week at running back, Dominic Lovett, and Luke McConkey for wide receiver for Georgia, and then Brock Bowers, of course, TE1 of this class and forever out of Georgia.
I think a big aspect of we are kind of a dynasty show too, but the prospect of Brock Bowers hasn't produced in the stat sheet. He's doing a lot of the things right now that don't produce stats. He is the tight end 1. Yes, he didn't have that good of a receiving game and stuff, but he obviously can do it. But Georgia's got an easy schedule. They're not going to need him to do what he did last year because his competition is just that much worse. Kendall Milton's going to have a heavy game, I would assume, and with Georgia's new quarterback, yeah, I mean they got to get him going as well. So Brock Bowers should be seeing some play, but I don't expect it this game.
The thing, I mean, Bowers, he's just one of those guys. I think we talked about him every single week so far. He's just one of those guys where he doesn't have to put up the numbers necessarily.
Exactly.
It would be nice if he does. Kind of want to get some more film on him, but there's enough film on him out there. But he is one of those guys that no matter what happens, unless it's like a catastrophic injury, he should be taken early, and he's going to help out his NFL team. And you're going to want to play him once he gets into the groove of things in the NFL in your fantasy lineups. He's going to, I mean, Kelsey, by then Kelsey will be pretty much on his way out, and Kittle's going to be in his 30s, and Andrews will be pushing 30 because this is another year or 2 away that we're talking about. So,
Yeah. And Darren Waller's always has a hamstring injury, it seems like. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the tight end 5s or the top tight end 5s are getting older.
So it's this next regime of Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers and Dalton Kincaid, and that's kind of what we're looking forward to. And that was a 27.5 spread for Oklahoma or Georgia. Sorry. Next game is 19 Oklahoma at Tulsa. ESPN2, you can find that game. A couple Oklahoma guys. You got the quarterback Dylan Gabriel. You got the running back Tawee Walker, and then their wide receiver Andrell Anthony. And then Tulsa has a senior running back over there, Jordan Ford. You got anybody else for them, or you want to touch on any of those guys?
I'm excited to watch Dylan Gabriel work. I mean, he is on the shorter end, and he was on my list of guys that I wanted to talk about this week. But he's he might be 5'11", 204, but he has every throw in his arsenal. And I'm excited to see that. I think they're just letting him do what he does best now. I think Oklahoma had a problem last year of he needed to learn that coach's scheme, and now they're kind of just scheming around what he can do, and then that's going to really help improve Oklahoma, I think.
And that's going to be, like I said, that's on ESPN2. That spread is 27.5 for Oklahoma. So some pretty big spreads. And this next one gets even bigger. Number 10, Alabama going up against South Florida. That is on ABC. You got running back from Bama, Jace McClellan. You got Ja'Cory Brooks, wide receiver. You got, and that's from Bama. And then you got Bama CJ Dippre from the tight end. And then there was a couple South Florida wide receivers that I found. Wasn't really impressed with the roster overall, but Caffrey Brown and Sean Atkins, wide receiver, a couple guys that you could look out for. And if they're going to be competitive in this game and try to stay within that 33 overall spread, they're going to need to step up and throw some yards and some touchdowns in there.
Yep, and I mean, Ja'Cory Brooks is in a precarious spot because we just still don't know what Jalen Milrow is. So I think they need a game like this to just really get their confidence up, and I think they will be able to do that.
All right, and then a little bit later, not a little bit later, but a half hour later, starting on Fox, is Western Kentucky going up against number 6 Ohio State. Another got a few guys to look for in this game. It's pretty Ohio State heavy. The only Western Kentucky that I could mention is Austin Reed, the quarterback. But a lot of times when you are heavy on one side of the ball, you are going to be looking at the quarterback on the other side because they gotta keep their team in it. For Ohio State, Kyle McCord, quarterback, pair of running backs and Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams, pair of wide receivers and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka. We haven't really mentioned a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. as far as like breaking him down or anything like that. I know we've mentioned him on each show, but I think everybody knows about him already. It's really not much to say. He's wide receiver 1 overall, should be the first wide receiver taken, and I think he's going to be an immediate impact. And then Kate Stover, tight end for Ohio State, and that spread is 29.
Yeah, and then the next game at 4 p.m. on ESPNU is Tulane at Southern Miss. You know, I like my boy Frank Gore Jr. because he is a great running back, but there is also another running back there that I'm kind of worried about, and that was Rodriguez Clark. He's also a junior, and he was getting a little bit more carries in that last game, so it's kind of interesting to see how that's going to go. But again, we have to expect that with running backs, especially on the next level. Like there's going to be timeshares. So I mean, Frank Gore Jr. We know what his dad was with what he can do with his touches, so I think I'm not worried about that. Then you have the Southern Miss wide receiver in Jacarius Caston. He's fun to watch. And then Tulane has a few guys called Michael Pratt, quarterback, Lawrence Keys, and Jaquan Jackson as wide receivers. I expect a pretty high scoring game. I don't know what the spread looks like, but maybe take the over on that one.
The over is 49.5, low over, but it is not, 13. Tulane is minus 13, so they're heavy road dogs or heavy road favorites there. Yeah, I think Frank Gore's up there in about the 8 to 10 range for running backs overall going into the class. See if he could raise that stock a little bit. But it's going to be overall. It's going to be a good running back class. I think we mentioned in episode 1 or episode 2 that there's really not a Bijan in this class, but there's more. I think it's more quantity than the one quality guy. I mean, there's more guys that came out of 2020, 2023 that are going to be pretty good. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, a couple later round guys, but I think this class has a lot of like mid round guys that are going to help out your teams if they fall in the right spots.
Yep, to go into the rotations of all those teams for sure.
Going into the later slate, a couple games starting at 7:30, 8 Eastern time. The first one's Tennessee at Florida, number 11 Tennessee. That's on ESPN. Get to come home, shower, and watch that game. You got Joe Milton, the quarterback, Jalen Wright, the running back, both for Tennessee. Brew McCoy, the wide receiver from Tennessee. McKellen Castles, tight end for Tennessee. And then Florida has a Montrell Johnson running back.
Yeah, Joe Milton is always fun to watch. I think the player to watch in this game is McCallan Castles. Again, I'm going tight end heavy apparently on this version, but he's another guy that can improve his stock if he starts showing what he can do. He reminds me a lot of what Luke Musgrave did. He might not be as athletic as Luke Musgrave, but he can rise his stock like Musgrave did last year. So with that, we'll just go right into the ABC game for 7:30 p.m. and that's Pittsburgh at West Virginia. Both kind of rebuilding teams. We don't know what their coaches are going to look like next year. So Gavin Bartholomew, tight end for Pitt's, always fun to watch. And then West Virginia has Devin Carter, wide receiver. I think West Virginia is closer to getting a new head coach, so we'll see either transfers and stuff come in and see how well they do. But they need to start doing something different in the Big 12 to stay in the Big 12.
All right, and then we got Syracuse at Purdue. I unfortunately don't have the spread for that because I'm not allowed to bet it here in New York State, but that's going to be on 7:30 on NBC. Syracuse has a couple of guys: Garrett Schrader, quarterback; Isaiah Jones, wide receiver; and Oronde Gadsden, who's kind of like a wide receiver tight end. You'd see him listed as a tight end on some sites, wide receiver on other sites. But he's a pretty big guy that is one of Schrader's favorite targets. And then Purdue, I just mentioned Hudson Card, could be a later round quarterback there. They're a younger team too. After losing Charlie Jones to the draft and a couple other guys, they're kind of in a rebuild as well. But obviously, if Syracuse is going to be putting up some points, Purdue with Hudson Card as the snapback and put some points on the board as well.
Yeah, Hudson Card was no slouch at Texas either. He was pretty good. He could sling the rock. But then Oronde Gadsden, like you said, he reminds me of Evan Ingram a lot. Like he's very athletic. He's just a big guy. We don't know if he can do fully what tight ends do, but he's good. The next game we want to talk about was Akron at Kentucky, and it's pretty Kentucky heavy on this one too. There are some Akron guys that I like, but the ones that really are going to stick out is Kentucky's Devin Leary. He's the transfer from NC State, and he had a few good games on ESPN last year. Ray Davis, running back, and then Tavion Robinson for Kentucky as well. He's a wide receiver. If they can get it going, then that spread is probably pretty high for Kentucky, but Akron needs to do some things to stop Devin Leary, and I don't know if they have it or not.
Yeah, that spread is going to be 26. Kentucky is favored by at home, so huge numbers there. Another game going on at 7:30 on ESPN2 is going to be BYU at Arkansas. Mentioned a couple of Arkansas guys over the last couple of weeks between KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, Raheem Sanders, the running back. They got a wide receiver over there, Isaac Tesla. Definitely look out for him. And BYU is coming back with their own Isaac. They got Isaac Rex, tight end. That game is – I don't remember if I had the spread on that one. Oh, that was up. Okay, that's 8.5 for Arkansas, so should be a closer game. Definitely look out for those Arkansas guys. And anybody you want to talk?
No, not really. I really like Isaac Rex as well. I was surprised he didn't come out last year. But with that, we'll just move on to the next game, and that's on Fox at 8 p.m. That's TCU at Houston. Houston has another gunslinging quarterback in Donovan Smith. I think he runs the air raid offense pretty well. And then TCU still needs to start bouncing back from their Colorado mishap, and their two running backs can get it done for them in Trey Sanders and Imani Bailey. They both have different skill sets, but they complement each other well, and then hoping that they can relieve their quarterback a little bit more than what they have, because he's also a younger guy because they just lost Max Duggan. So just get some points under that quarterback's feet, give him some confidence, and these two will definitely do it. And Trey Sanders, I personally think, is moving up some boards because the guy always falls forward and he's just really good at what he does.
Another one of those rebuilding teams, I guess you could call them. Lost a lot in this past draft and started out ranked, and after 2 weeks they dropped down quite a bit in the standings. Two more games here left on the national slate. ESPN is going to be carrying Colorado State at Colorado. Gets you a good chance to get a good look at Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback, and Xavier Weaver, wide receiver, both out of Colorado. I believe that was a heavy spread for Colorado. Yeah, 23.5 on that one for Colorado. Number 18, they came into the season unranked, went to 22, now to 18. if you haven't had a chance to check them out, I know it's a late game, especially here on the East Coast. Get it about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, depending on your time zone. But definitely stay up late, watch that game because Colorado they're fun to watch. Sanders has jumped up significantly in drafts that come out next year. I mean, he's kind of competing up there with Caleb Williams and Drake May to be that number 2, 3, 4 guy taken in the draft. And yeah, Colorado State, not a lot to talk about there, but this Colorado team, they're going to put up some points, and it's going to be, they've beaten 2 good teams already. I won't say good, but they've beaten 2 decent teams already, and this one should be even better.
Well, their win total over under was 3.5, and they only have 2. So I mean, and I don't know what the Colorado State head coach is doing, but he's calling out Dion again. So don't give them more fuel because right now they're running hot. And the best thing for Colorado State to do was to not poke the bear, and he's poking the bear. And that's one of the most dynamic bears out there right now is in Deion Sanders and his team. So they're going to get trounced. Colorado State's going to get trounced, and people should stop being surprised by this because they are good. And then, I mean, again, in a few weeks, it's going to be Colorado USC. Then we'll really know. But that'll be another dynamic game, probably around the 9 p.m. mark again on Eastern time zone. So, but it's worth it. They're worth watching. They have skill positions everywhere, like Alton McCaskill, their running back that hasn't even really played much yet. He's a transfer from Houston. He knows how to do it. Their freshman Donovan Edwards, he's very good. But then they have a lot of good wide receivers that we've already talked about in Travis Hunter and in Jimmy Horn. But they have another guy, Xavier Weaver. He had a huge game last week, and I expect him to be. He's probably the most. I mean, Travis Hunter also plays corner, so he's got a lot of snaps. Jimmy Horn's still a transfer as well coming in. Xavier Weaver is probably one of their most pure wide receivers they have, so he needs to start getting that rapport with Sanders, and he is. And I think he's going to be a huge aspect of the league because, I mean, this is college. We don't have a lot of corners that can cover 3 guys. So the last game on the slate is Fresno State at Arizona State. That's FS1 at 10:30 p.m. I'm going to be watching the Colorado game and not this one. It just is what it is. There are some guys from Fresno that we do like, and that's Eric Brooks, wide receiver, and Elijah Gilliam, running back. What about the Arizona State guys?
Arizona State running back Cameron Scadaboo and Jalen Conyers, the tight end, another tight end kind of to add to the list there. That spread was -3 for Fresno State. So that's probably one of the that we've went over as far as this slate goes. And there's a lot of teams that we really haven't mentioned at all that, like I said, these are all the games that basically your standard cable or hooking up an antenna, you should be able to just throw on and watch. But like ESPN Plus is carrying a lot of games. If you have that subscription, ACC Network, Pac-10. I mean, you guys know how Saturdays go for college football. We just wanted to really bring out the games that if just a casual watcher that doesn't pay for those subscriptions can kind of watch. And if you like the way that this format went, as opposed to how we did week 1 and week 2, let us know because I kind of like this way a little bit better. But if you want to hear the 8 different guys that we break down, you could let us know. We could do it that way. If you like this way, where we're breaking down, not really breaking down, but we're talking a little bit about more games and mentioning some players, just let us know, and we could do it this way. Let us know in the comments. Reach out to us on our Twitters and our Facebooks. And do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
You can reach me on Twitter at Cody Folden. My DMs are always open, even if you think it's a bad take. I love having any of that conversations. And yeah, I'm excited for another college football slate.
And you could reach me at Jerry Wilkie FM on Twitter/X. You could also find me on Facebook, same name, Jerry Wilkie. I'm more likely to answer a message on Facebook if you just send a message to the DMs there. But if you tweet at me or even hit me up in the messenger, I will get to you. I got all the notifications on my phone on, so I'll find all of them. But Facebook is a little easier for me to get to. But yeah, like I said, if you whatever way that you guys like how we broke it down, if you liked week 1 and 2, or if you like it this way where we kind of go through a majority of the games that you could watch, let us know, and we'll keep that in mind for next week. We're gonna have our first set of rankings. I think we'll do that on next week's show, and then like I mentioned, we want to do a show where we're talking about freshmen and sophomores. That way we can kind of look into future draft classes and go from there, because there's a lot of these teams have some young guys that are putting up some big numbers. Unfortunately, they're not coming out this year, so those programs are in pretty good shape for the next couple of years. But for our fantasy teams and our rookie drafts and buying into 2024 draft picks, they don't necessarily help yet, outside of the guys that we've talked about pretty much already. So we do want to do a younger show within the next couple of weeks, and we want to get a ranking show and get those rankings posted and get them on our Twitters and on the website going for 2. Definitely check that out, and we will see you guys next week, and enjoy the week 3 NCAA slate, the week 2 football slate, and we'll see you guys next